I have been living for free for the last 3 years based on 18 months of living expenses that I bought in the fourth quarter of 2022. The reason that strategy worked so well is because I did not wait for a future dip. I bought the dip I was living in and have been living on that Bitcoin ever since. So people are constantly wanting to undo the effects of inflation, have the ability at some point in their life to live entirely off investments, like I do, living for free for the last 3 years on Bitcoin. The Bitcoin I bought in the fourth quarter of 2022 was equal to 18 months of living expenses. I have now been living on those 18 months of living expenses for 3 solid years now. Now, you probably think, wait, 18 months of living expenses should have run out at the 18-month mark. And they would have, except Bitcoin has been going up roughly twice as fast as the rate I've been spending it. So at the end of the first 18 months, I had an additional, 24 months. At the end of the first 36 months, which is where we are at, I have an additional 36 months. So right now, I have been living for free off of 18 months of living expenses for 3 years, and I have more than 3 years of living expenses left to go. So the original 18 months has now turned into more than 6 years worth of Bitcoin. And the reason that worked is I did not wait until Bitcoin was expensive before I bought it. The problem is people are constantly wanting to buy Bitcoin when it's expensive. So most recently, over the last few days, Bitcoin has been hovering around $102,000, $103,000. I just checked my watch before I started this video, and Bitcoin was at 105,105. And I know what's going to happen. What's going to happen is the price is going to go up, and it's going to, at some point, I don't know if it'll be this week or next month or sometime in 2026, nobody knows. But at some point, the price will tear past 125,000 a coin, and then it'll tear past $150,000 per coin. And everybody's going to say, hey, Joel, I want to do that living for free thing. How do I do that living for free thing? And my answer is, well, you can start now, but you're going to be a lot more patient than if you had started when Bitcoin was 105,000 a coin. Because I recommend once you buy initial Bitcoin that you plan to live on in the future, to not start spending it until you're up at least 25% on your investment. And right now, if you buy Bitcoin at 105, you can be 25% up on your investment, in my opinion, in the relatively near term. Now, what is relatively near term? I'm not sure. But a lot of people did this. So I started recording videos on living for free a long time ago. But I remember in the middle of 2024, I did a really long video, like 32 minutes long, with all the details about what it takes to live for free and all of that. And I think Bitcoin was like 67,000 a coin. But of course, nobody wants to buy it at 67,000 a coin because it had been at 67,000 a coin in that ballpark between, 55,000 and 70,000 for a long time. And people felt like it wasn't going anywhere. Now, of course, if you had bought a bunch of $67,000 Bitcoin, you'd be up more than 50% on your investment. And the living for free process could probably start, depending on how much you bought and how much, your runway is, the rate at which you spend it. Now, I do think now requires more than 18 months. If you wanted to live for free on Bitcoin, I think it requires more than 18 months. I don't know what that number is. Somewhere between, I'm guessing, 36 months and 5 years, which is 60 months. Obviously, the more Bitcoin matures, the more of the upside of Bitcoin is in the past versus the future, and therefore it takes more Bitcoin to get in a position where you can live for free. Now, this strategy, of course, works even if you have like $10. It's just that instead of living entirely for free, you're going to be buying yourself a free cup of coffee once a quarter or something like that. Obviously, a lot more fun than just having free coffee once a quarter for life is living entirely for free, but obviously that depends on how much Bitcoin you can front load in whatever form. Maybe that's in a retirement account, maybe that's in, River or Coinbase or whatever. But at times like this, the reason I bring it up is I know when I recorded the video at roughly 67,000 a coin, a lot of people were like, okay, but I don't want to buy the Bitcoin right now because it's not doing anything. But then as soon as it went on a tear past 100,000, people are reaching out to me saying, hey, I watched your video from 6 months ago about living for free. I want to do that now. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. But we just went on this wild tear from 67,000 to above 100,000. And now you're going to have to be patient. Well, guess what? You've had to be patient for the last year now. Bitcoin is still up like, 30, 40% in the last 12 months. But obviously that's less than it is normally up. And now strikes me as a great time to be accumulating Bitcoin for a living for free strategy, even if, you can't live entirely for free because you can only afford 1 month or 2 months or 1 week of living expenses. Hey, maybe you can live a day for free here and there, depending on what you can afford. So, waiting tends to just not work. Additionally, right before I started this video, I uploaded the entire Bitcoin history into ChatGPT and I asked it a few questions. So, the first question I said is, okay, if I started every day and instead of buying Bitcoin right then, when I woke up in the morning, I was waiting for a 1% dip, how often would I get a 1% dip at some point that day or in any subsequent day? If I was just waiting for a 1% dip. And the answer was 92%. 92% of the time I would eventually get a 1% dip. The problem is those odds are horrible because you have an 8% chance you're never going to get it, a 1% dip. So in order for the math to make sense for you to wait for dips to buy Bitcoin, you would need a greater than 99% chance that you're going to get a 1% dip. If you have a greater than 99% chance of a 1% dip, then I think mathematically over time you could potentially justify that. But you can't because you only have a 92% chance of ever getting a 1% dip off any price point when you just start first thing in the morning and decide you're going to wait for a dip instead of buy. At the 5% level, let's assume you're waiting for a 5% dip. You're only going to get a 5% dip 78% of the time, which again means 22% of the time your 5% dip never showed up. In order for the math to make sense on a 5% dip, you would need to get a 5% dip more than 95% of the time. Again, simple odds here, subtract from 100. So how often do you need a 1% dip to wait for a dip? What level of certainty? The answer is 100 minus 1% is 99%. But it's not 99%, it's 92%. So the odds are 8 to 1 against you waiting for a dip. For a 5% dip, the odds are more than 4 to 1 against you because the price only dips by 5% on average 78% of the time as compared to just pulling the trigger and buying the Bitcoin right then. So 22% of the time you never buy the Bitcoin, you're left out in the cold, missing out on thousands of percents of gains. Now, if you're even greedier and you want a 10% dip, that only happens on average about 70% of the time, 7-0. So again, the odds are still 3 to 1 against you that you're going to be waiting around for a 10% dip, and there's a 30% chance you're never going to get the 10% dip. And in order for it to make mathematical sense to wait, you would have to have a greater than 90% chance that you're going to get a 10% dip. So every way you slice the data, whether you slice it mathematically based on the open price, the low price, the high price, the close price every day, and you try to mathematically figure out, hey, should I wait for a dip of a certain percentage point instead of buying just right now? Whether you run it mathematically or intuitively, which I know intuitively because I've talked to so many people over the years that tell me that they're going to buy Bitcoin when it dips. And then later I ask them if they did and they tell me no. Because either they didn't notice it dipped and then they missed it, or it did dip and they freaked out because it was dipping and it was scary to buy it and they thought it was going to go lower. So whatever number they picked that they were going to buy it at, they lowered that number and said, oh, well, now I'm not going to buy it if it ever dips to $97,000. I'm going to only buy it if it dips to $92,000. So they keep moving their number down to avoid having to make a decision. So either they don't pull the trigger, or they move the number and they don't pull the trigger, or they lose track or lose interest and don't pull the trigger. You just can't win the waiting game. Whether you're trying to live for free on Bitcoin, whether you're trying to accumulate Bitcoin as much as possible for the future, whatever that may hold, no matter how you slice and dice it, including if you run all the math using ChatGPT and the entire price history of Bitcoin, you end up with the same conclusion, which is buy as much Bitcoin as you can and hold on to it for as long as conceivably possible. Now, someone reached out to me the other day and was like, hey, I need to buy some Bitcoin. Should I buy it right now? And the price was like 102, 103,000. Should I wait? Should I wait if it dips more because it's already down from, 126,000? And I was like, no, don't overthink it. Buy as much Bitcoin as you can and sit on it for as long as conceivably possible. Right now, it strikes me as a great time to buy Bitcoin. Bitcoin's been mostly grinding sideways for most of a year now. The longer it grinds sideways, the more time the python has to digest the pig, the more people have an opportunity to get on and off the bus at all the different stops between $75,000 and $126,000. the more time everybody can get on and off the bus, on and off the elevator, the python can digest the pig, whatever analogy you want to use, the more time the market's been doing that, the sooner it's likely to then go up again. So because we've been grinding sideways for most of 2025, I think it's a fantastic time to buy more Bitcoin right now, because I don't know how much longer we're going to be grinding sideways. The trading volume in the last 24 hours was $58 billion. 58 billion. $58 billion of Bitcoin got bought and sold in the last 24 hours worldwide. That is an insane buying volume. Now, it was offset mostly by selling volume, obviously. Now, not all of it was offset because the price had to rise from 103,000 to 105,000 to satiate the demand of those buyers. So, the buy pressure was slightly outpaced the sell pressure, which is why the price slightly rose to $105,000. But those buyers, there's 95% of the world who doesn't own any Bitcoin. Those buyers are going to outrun the sellers at some point. Now, could it dip before that happens? Sure. Everything could always dip before it goes up. But when you're dealing with something with perfect monetary properties that has all of the core elements to become the future monetary system of the world and is already well on its way to doing exactly that, it just doesn't make any sense to not buy as much of it as you can and hold on to it for as long as conceivably possible, which has been my advice from day one and will continue to be. So I think $105,000 Bitcoin is on sale. I plan to buy additional Bitcoin as soon as I get a check from SD Bullion for a small amount of gold and silver that I bought in 2017 that I decided to dump onto the marketplace for gold and silver last week. So it is currently in the FedEx transit system, bouncing around somewhere on a FedEx truck as my gold and silver on the way to SD Bullion. And when it gets there, they will wire transfer me within, 5 to 10 business days, a check for the amount of the gold and silver. I will immediately transform that into Bitcoin as fast as conceivably possible. So, of course, part of me is wishing the price would stay down so that I can buy more Bitcoin for cheaper. But the other part of me is like, hey, the more Bitcoin rises, well, I still have a lot of Bitcoin already, so it's better for everybody if it rises, but it's better for the people who are buying right now if it doesn't rise for a little while longer. So Bitcoin will always do its thing. Now's a great time to buy. If you wait for dips, you're mathematically guaranteed to eventually lose. Just like if you're gambling in a casino, you are mathematically guaranteed to eventually lose. If you are waiting for dips to buy your Bitcoin, you are mathematically guaranteed to eventually lose, meaning you don't ever get the dip that you're waiting for, and you never buy the Bitcoin you are waiting for, and you're out in the cold owning less Bitcoin than you otherwise would. So the formula is simple. Buy as much Bitcoin as you can, hold on to it for as long as conceivably possible, and send me any questions you have. You can reach me on my cell phone at any time. Just text me at 601-207-0813. That number again, 601-207-0813. I will never tell you to send your Bitcoin anywhere. I do not have a trading company. I do not make money on any of my Bitcoin advocacy. So if anybody ever pretends like they're impersonating me, don't ever take action that doesn't sound like something I would tell you to do. And the only thing I'm ever going to tell you to do is buy as much Bitcoin as you can, hold on to it for as long as conceivably possible, buy it on River or Coinbase, and store it on Bitkey if you have more than $10,000 of Bitcoin. bitkey.world, WORLD. You could buy it straight from their website or on Amazon or Best Buy or whatever. So the formula is simple. Don't mess it up. Don't overthink it. Buy as much Bitcoin as you can and sit on it for as long as conceivably possible. And once you're in the position where your Bitcoin represents the vast majority of your assets and it becomes the only thing you can spend because it's the only thing you have to spend, then you can live on Bitcoin like I do. And I have been living for free for the last 3 years. And the Bitcoin that I already have for that strategy that I bought with 18 months of living expenses back in 2022 at the current rate will last me an additional 3 years. But as the price of Bitcoin goes up, that expands. So I anticipate within the next 6 months, not only will I have 3 years of living expenses covered for the future, that will have expanded to 4 years of living expenses in the future. And that's the way it works. It works great. Obviously, it takes more than 18 months of living expenses now to live for free forever because the price of Bitcoin is higher now, which means it's going up slower than it did back then. But it is still the best performing asset in the world. And I think it will still outperform every other asset in the world. And it's still the best asset to live whatever percent for free you can, whatever that is. So have a great evening. Buy as much Bitcoin as you can. Sit on it for as long as conceivably possible. Avoid scams and hacks. Make sure your Google account is locked down with two-step verification turned on. Use common sense. And if you have a lot of Bitcoin, make sure it's in Bitkey. And if you're not comfortable to doing that, at least make sure you have the vault feature of Coinbase turned on or the force field feature of River turned on, both of which require time to unlock Bitcoin, thereby making it much less likely that hackers and scammers will get all of your Bitcoin in the event that they get some of your Bitcoin. But Bitkey is way better, way more secure, and a much better solution all around. So, formula has not changed ever since I've been doing Bitcoin advocacy. The formula for living whatever percent of your life for free is possible based on your finances involves you buying as much Bitcoin as you can right now. Formula is the same no matter what. The best time to buy something is when it's on sale. It's also the least comfortable time to buy it. It's the scariest to buy things when they're on sale, but that is the best time, especially if you're planning on living on that in the future. The cheaper you buy it now, the faster you can do that. So follow the formula. Let me know if you have questions. Message me on Facebook Messenger or text me. I am always here to help. Everything I do is for free. And be on the lookout for hackers and scammers. Have a great night.